Hey everyone, welcome to the Tattoos with Intention podcast 2025. Just a quick note before we start. If you enjoy listening to these conversations or you find anything in them useful, could you please click the follow button? It'll just help spread the conversation about intentionality and tattooing more than anything else you could do. Today's episode, first episode of the year, it's about celebrating Tattoo Pathways wins last year and also taking aim for the future, what we want to achieve this year. So we've already achieved our goal of releasing one episode a month in 2024. I'm pretty pumped about that. We're going to do it again this year. This podcast is our zero cost information that's designed to help give you, the listener, insights and tools to reflect and relate to your own tattoo journey in a more meaningful way. This year, we're focusing on getting some support from people that are listening and from people that get involved with what we do to help float the boat that we're building. And we're doing this by growing Tattoo Pathway community. It's both an online and an in-person space. There's lots of ways you can contribute and support what we're doing, whether it's signing up to be a community member, donating or volunteering some time or skills. We'd love to have you on board. Today's episode, we're going to frame up some concepts that have been developing in the back end for some time that impact people's tattoo experiences. We're mainly going to focus on the contemporary tattoo culture and tattoo psychology. So the way you think about and engage with tattooing. And these insights have stemmed from the work that we did last year, both in the fundamentals coursework with people, the in-person mapping workshop that we did, the webinars we did, like for first-time tattoo aspirants, and also from observations and conversations with those that I'm continuously working with and actually tattooing, and with other artists and people in the industry that are acquaintances and friends and collectors. So we're going to have a bit of an overview of the contemporary tattoo atmosphere. And it's also an exploration of why something like a pathway, which is what Tattoo Pathway is aiming to produce, is needed. It's a concept that matters to you if you're getting tattooed or you want to get tattooed, and to everyone else in the tattoo industry and field at the moment. So indeed, we're going to be looking at the very reason why Tattoo Pathway exists. And hopefully this episode is going to give you a clear picture of what we're doing behind the scenes, creating educational resources, opening up important dialogical spaces, and researching the tattoo experience at an academically recognized level. But it's just me today. So there's no guests. You got to get comfy. I'll be reading my notes on this screen. I'll also be expanding on different concepts as we go. And as always, I'm focusing on those layers beneath the surface of a tattoo, what the process is, what it does for people, rather than what tattoos are as artworks or the physical result. This isn't a podcast or a video about tattoo styles and what's cool and what's trending or how to technically do a better tattoo, not the space. Okay, so if I had to pick one word for 2024 to sum it up, it would be conception. And that's because it was the year that we formed Tattoo Pathway. It's not just tattooing. Tattoo Pathway is about more than tattooing. Tattoo being the technical knowledge and the pathway being the spiritual wisdom, what's applicable through time. And so even though I've been plugging away at this podcast, Tattoos with Intention, since 2015 by myself, and I ran some courses back in 2019 and 2020 around tattoo philosophy, last year, 2024, was actually the founding year for Tattoo Pathway. That's who I work for now. It was the first year I moved beyond myself, moved beyond my wife working in the background and helping me. And that meant we took on our first team member, Taylor, and she took on the role of research lead. She also wore a bunch of different hats throughout the year. And together, the three of us have achieved more than I thought we were capable of. So I'm very thankful to Taylor and to my wife, Jarish, and to myself. We've done really well. Our energy and dedication has provided something for people. And this year, we're just going to keep pushing that. So what we've established is an education and research institute. It's legitimate now. It costs me money. But hopefully there's the potential to generate resources beyond what I could alone just tattooing people. And in the future, that'll become our reservoir to fulfill our mission and our vision. And so if you haven't checked out our website yet, Tattoo Pathway's mission is to provide a clear pathway for people to engage in the transformational power of tattooing. And it's also for future generations to have that pathway, to be custodians of something that's sacred and that's going to lead them to be dignified in their beauty. My one word for 2025 to cast a stone into the future is convergence. Yeah, tendency towards one point. It's the tip, the apex, the focal point. And so this year, it's convergence because we're coming together under Tattoo Pathway community. We're cooperating, we're co-creating, co-learning. And this experience of the Tattoo Pathway community is really our focal point. I just want to touch on dignified beauty for a moment before we move on. And that's because dignified beauty is our sixth pillar of the pathway. It is that convergence point of all the other parts of our framework. It's the result of walking the pathway is to be dignified in your beauty. That's what we take aim for. And so what makes something beautiful and what makes something dignified are actually different, right? And those two things coming together is not as common an occurrence as you might think these days, especially with so many amazing artists in the industry, a lot of people being intentional in their approach. It's actually more common for people to miss the mark and to not land in a place where those two things come together. Just because something's beautiful doesn't mean it's dignified. It's not just about a well-executed tattoo, although that is important. It's also about having a justified reason for it being there that makes sense. So it needs to be rational, not just now, but in the future as well. So it needs to be a relationship between your tattoo and the rest of your tattoos, your tattoo and the bigger picture of you, the inner picture of you. All of these different pieces need to make sense and fit. So that's a topic I'm going to talk about a lot in this episode, the fitted nature of a tattoo. Is the tattoo suitable? Has it been prepared well? Is it qualified for the person and for the purpose and the process? All of that needs to make sense. All of that needs to fit to arrive somewhere where you're dignified in your beauty, where that beautiful adornment you have makes sense. It's coherent. It's meant to be there. And for a lot of people, this fitted aspect we're talking about is only partly figured out, or it's being figured out as they go. And that's okay too. I work with people in that way. But the main thing is that there's no real guide for people to find resolution there. Or maybe they're being guided by someone that's misleading the process. Again, not in an intentional way. Or perhaps someone has no idea that their tattoo has the potential to make more sense with the bigger picture of who they are in their life. Or that it can, and it does, ripple out and influence their sense of self in a far more complex way than they presume. So going through a process of checking and balancing and changing the way you get tattooed or the way you relate to your tattoo so that they look and feel good and make sense, that's dignified beauty. And we'll return to it again at the end of the episode and just really drive home what dignified beauty is about. So moving on, we guide transformational tattoo journeys. That is the simplest way I can convey what it is that we do at Tattoo Pathway, what the community is about, what it represents. I'll say it again. We guide transformational tattoo journeys. And you might be thinking, why do I need a guide? I already have tattoos. I've already got an artist. It's not like it's hard to figure out. You go to the tattoo shop, you just get a tattoo, right? You look online, you see what's happening. But if we reflect on the contemporary tattoo culture, we did a lot of work on this 2024, lots of research and observation, and it's an accumulation. It's this build up, this surge of the contemporary industry. If we look at it, there's an evident lack of guidance. That's why there's a need for a guide. Yeah. For those people that are seeking to get tattooed or that are already tattooed, that are like looking at their tattoos and going, what am I doing? What have I been doing? What's going on? And this shows up in a high number of people when they say they have tattoo regret. In our research, our survey last year, we had 47%, of participants, nearly half. So they experienced tattoo regret in some form. So when Taylor analyzed the top 50 posts of all times on the Tattoo Advice Forum, Reddit, which has over 300,000 members, there was a similar trend. There was people that were like expressing very clear reasons why they regret tattoos or why they face challenge. It was clear. There was things like being unhappy with the design, mismatched expectations, the relationship with the artist, not having the correct dynamics, making rushed decisions. And so from this, we can see that a high number of people in the contemporary tattoo culture are actually missing the point of getting tattooed completely. because they're just engaging with it on a superficial level. So what is the point? Am I saying that people can get tattoos that are wrong? Who am I to say what's right and wrong? It's a bit of a spicy topic, you know? Who am I to decide what mistakes people should or shouldn't make? So let's look at how nuanced it actually is, okay? Just set a standard for what we're talking about. Suppose someone wants to get a name tattooed. Maybe it's the name of their mother or the name of their partner or the name of their town or football club or something. If the spelling is incorrect, you'd say that tattoo technically is wrong. Yeah. Or if you were to get like a flag or something with specific coloring and you get the order wrong, that's also wrong, right? It's probably not intentional. It's just an innocent lack of attention. It's a mistake, but you can notice it and it's clear and it's wrong. Maybe it can be fixed. Maybe it can't. Luckily, I've never done that. I have seen it happen. I had friends message me halfway through a tattoo, like, what do I do? You know, tough situation to be in. They made a mistake. The tattoo was wrong. So we can just call it what it is. But let's revisit this concept of fit, whether a tattoo fits and whether there's a need for a guide. And hopefully this will help clarify that role for someone, especially if they're on a transformational journey, if they're seeking change and they're also getting tattooed, that's paralleling their journey. They're getting tattooed at the same time. Then maybe there's some value for them in this, as opposed to just going it alone, just doing the usual path to getting tattooed. The technical fault of incorrect spelling or the wrong order of colors that we looked at before is analogous to putting your shoe on the wrong foot, right? So shoes and tattoos, this is kind of what we're going to use to explain this a little bit more. You didn't pay attention. Yeah. So you put the shoe on the wrong foot, then you notice it's wrong. No big deal. Wrong shoe, wrong foot. Kids, they often need more guidance in these situations. I've got 3 kids. If you've helped kids put shoes on before, they're more likely to put them on the wrong feet. It happens all the time. Sometimes they don't even notice that their shoe's on the wrong foot. Someone else might have to point it out for them. But even if no one does point it out for them, in time, they'll realize that the shoe's on the wrong foot. Even if they keep doing it like that for a while, eventually they'll work it out. A more subtle layer, however, is when you have a shoe and it's on the correct foot and it still doesn't fit, still doesn't quite feel right. It's uncomfortable, right? I can remember trying school shoes on, for example, at the start of the year. You know, your foot's growing throughout the year, you try and get new shoes, and there's someone, they put your foot in the little measurer and they might get you to walk around and they'll feel your toe, see how close it is to the end. So there's this process of getting the optimal fit for something. It's not just one size fits all. It makes me think of Cinderella's glass slipper, for example, or the saying, if the shoe fits, wear it. But the idea is that one size doesn't fit all. And there's a lot to unpack here. So let's just go through it methodically. Contemporary tattoo culture's misinterpretation of what it's doing has left many of us misrepresented by our tattoos. Yeah. The shoes are becoming uncomfortable. This is the first sign that something's wrong or not right. And I'm not claiming to be like the tattoo shoe fit guy or the parent or the teacher that can see the kids have the shoes on the wrong feet. I'm saying I'm that kid with the shoes on the wrong feet, or the kid whose shoes don't fit very well anymore. I have that feeling that's a little bit awkward and uncomfortable in a lot of tattoos I've had to address because I've come through the contemporary tattoo culture. I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from knowing from the inside, getting tattooed a lot. I got tattooed for like 10 years and just got taken off track with a lot of it. Identified with things, you know, and I'm bringing myself back, and that sort of gives me the breadcrumbs to be able to do that with other people, guide other people in that process. So tattoos misrepresenting us create the feeling that we're talking about of uncomfort. It's also the regret that we noticed before. It's also the remorse. And to misrepresent is to like falsely or incorrectly represent something. It can be malicious, but it's also usually just ignorance or carelessness or just change. If it's just change, there's some value there. And that's what I want to look at. These layers are things that we sort of need to address to understand the concept of guidance within tattooing and the journey of tattooing. So if a tattoo doesn't fit or it doesn't feel right, you wouldn't get it. Okay. So if you were trying on a shoe and it didn't feel right, hopefully you wouldn't buy it. With a tattoo, if you can see it before you get it, like, oh, that tattoo's not in the right spot or it's the wrong size. I know I'd speak up and say something. And I bet most of you probably would. And so you wouldn't get a tattoo that initially doesn't fit right. Yeah. But what if you got the tattoo and then it didn't feel right? You'd be in a bit of shock. Some people refer to this as tattoo shock. It's similar to buyer's remorse. So you like the shoes right now, you try them on, you get them, whatever's coming up, you sort of can deal with it or you ignore it. But the next day, you don't like it. You've made a mistake. So you can just take them back. If you haven't cut the tag off, which I did with a Christmas present this year and got in a lot of trouble, don't cut the tag off. If you got the receipt, the tag's on there, you just take it back. But you can't do that with a tattoo, right? So if you get swept up in an idea, you're easily influenced or you're ungrounded and you get tattooed and the next day, the next week, or later in the year, it doesn't feel right, it's becoming uncomfortable, you can't return it. So what do? Reading through these forums and engaging with people that experience this through our surveys, usually some type of anxiety or shame prevails. You might feel stupid. You experience all of these emotional layers of change and impact from getting tattooed. Now, does it mean that you made the wrong decision? Not necessarily. Like we said, carelessness, ignorance, yeah, maybe you did. If you allowed yourself to make a decision in an unconscious state, if you're influenced by something that wasn't in your best interest. But the critical layer to pay attention to is what's actually causing the discomfort. The discomfort isn't instantaneous if it's because of change. Even if it is instantaneous and it's from something else, there's still this layer where we can assess your tattoo psychology. We can look at what's motivating and leading your decisions and your process. And then we can look at what's the result of the tattoo on your internal landscape, on who you are, on how you feel. Are you forcing yourself to wear uncomfortable shoes at your own expense because you want to be perceived in a certain way, or you aren't paying attention to the sensation? Another situation we see as a result of this potential is that people get frozen. They never get tattooed. The thought of something not representing them accurately in the future terrifies them, or they still run a stereotype. So they avoid committing to anything. They just sit on the fence, or they have an aversion. This idea of the future not representing who they are keeps them uninitiated. There's a pressure to fit in, and that demands enough of them already. The risk's too high. What if I look stupid? What if they outgrow the idea I have of myself? And it just feels more comfortable to remain not seen. But here's the gift of taking that step, of allowing yourself to be seen, to represent something, and ultimately to be seen by yourself. Someone might have a tattoo right now that doesn't feel quite right. You're not 100% sure about it. And like if someone asked you about that tattoo, you might just drop into a scripted reason when someone asks you why you got it. But deep down, that story is starting to wear thin. Or maybe you can just call it as it is. Like, that was an old tattoo. Don't feel the same way about it. I wish I didn't have it. But I urge you not to ignore that. Pay attention. Don't hide it under your t-shirt. Don't chuck a shirt over your shoulder at the beach and pretend that Southern Cross isn't there. Don't just wear high socks every time you put shoes on so that you can't see that Hakuna Matata on your ankle. Take a good look at it. How does it make you feel? What's not true about it? What's not true about that version of yourself? Because it's there, you're carrying it. And here's something that's valuable for you. There's a part of you that's trying to communicate something to yourself. You're trying to grow. There's part of you that wants to grow. So the shoe's becoming uncomfortable. And so that discomfort can also be an indicator of something that's positive, depending on how we frame it. So if discomfort arises under the right circumstances, we can be drawing ourselves closer to the need now of recognizing that guidance within tattooing and the tattoo pathway community might be of value, allowing us to see things, shining light on things that we couldn't see. And so I'll continue with this shoe analogy a little bit more, try and create a clearer visual for this discomfort and comfort. A shoe might be uncomfortable also until it's worn in, until it adapts to you or you would adapt to it. So this idea of optimal fit and maybe the need for discomfort shows up as a relationship between the foot and the shoe. Yeah. Is the shoe impeding the growth and damaging the foot inside the shoe, or is it supporting that foot? And is the shoe malleable and able to sort of move with the foot to get that correct fit? If we relate this to tattoos, it's like, is the tattoo binding you, constricting you to an identity, to a sense of self or a representation of yourself that's impeding your growth, that's degenerative? Or is it one that allows you to grow, allows you to form your sense of self over time in a way that's better fitted, that you can grow into, sort of pulls you into a space that's optimal? This layer of the shoe analogy, when we start to really pay attention to our feet and what's best for them, makes me think of how far we've come not wearing shoes. We didn't wear shoes at all for a long time, humans. Then we had this minimal footwear, and for someone who might have explored this, a lot of like health and natural movement people start looking at minimal footwear. When you do that, you understand that the shoes that most people wear, the normal shoe, the mainstream shoe, actually has too narrow of a cavity for the toes. So that the toes naturally sort of get pulled in. They're bound by the shoe and they don't naturally spread out and open up for optimal grip. Yeah, that's what happens. And when you start to look at this aspect and you see it for what it is, and you want to better your grip, you want your feet to be more natural, you don't want them to be bound anymore, you might move into a minimal shoe, like Vivos, for example. But this is just the way shoes look and are made, right? And since we can still walk in the shoe and function, you might not pay much attention to it. But once you start noticing, if you choose to do something that's better for your feet, you might choose minimal footwear. You might let your toes spread out. Some people even use little like toe expanders to try and correct the damage caused by the conventional shoes. And here's the interesting part, okay? If you make that shift, if you see that the normal thing that people are doing is no good for you, and maybe you can do something different, it's not mainstream, it's different. Some people are doing it, but it will correct your feet. It's going to become uncomfortable. Yeah. There's discomfort in wearing minimal shoes. They even recommend only wearing the minimal shoes for 5 to 10 minutes at a time until your foot gets used to it, because it can be painful to be walking around without your foot in its usual familiar discomfort. And so this is an interesting part of the discomfort comfort analysis. It overlays tattoo psychology really well. And let's say it hurts, but if you want to stay comfortable, you just keep wearing the old shoes. The thing is, they're not moving your feet forward on a path of betterment. So how this analogy overlays with tattoo psychology and who we want to be in 2025 is that our brain and body tend to affirm pre-existing beliefs. This is known in psychology as confirmation bias. Probably heard of it. So we all mirror and mimic what we've done before. It's just a repeat of the past. This is the subconscious. Now, if you're getting a tattoo, it's highly likely that you're probably approaching and operating out of this subconscious mindset in regards to your tattoo. You're probably just looking to validate who you currently are. And that's fine if you just want to wear the comfy shoes. If you're okay with the state that you're in and you're just wanting to reinforce that, go ahead. But if you're someone who wants to grow, change, learn, discover, expand, this would probably be the wrong way to go about getting tattooed. You'd be just putting on the same shoes that you've always had just because it's comfy. And for this reason, the subconscious mind becomes the gatekeeper. You can't pass through to a new version of yourself without confronting it, without going through some uncomfort. And this is the way tattooing's been used for a long time. The wise people of all cultures in the past knew this. That's why tattooing was something that came into a culture, into a community, along with other aspects of life that allowed the person to level up, allowed the person to move from one state of being into the next, usually coordinating it with other events, other timings in that person's life. So it was initiatory. It was moving someone into the unknown. And that's something we spoke about a lot last year in our podcast. So you can revisit some old episodes, listen to some people speaking about initiation, rites of passage that know way more than I do. But we just want to point to the fact that's the way tattooing's been used for a very long time. Not at this superficial level of just trying to make something look good or pretending to be something or doing something because it's funny or to be cool. It was actually used to move people through different stages of their life. So let's keep painting this picture of comfort and discomfort and the idea of right and wrong a little bit more. And we'll keep going with the feet, but we'll progress from the feet and the shoes, I promise. So comfort is where you currently are. Most people look to get tattooed here, just reinforcing who they are now and the life that they have now. Discomfort, on the other hand, is the presence of change. It requires you to pay closer attention. And if you haven't paid that attention yet to your tattoo process, it's highly likely you're just reinforcing something. There might be a discomfort that's familiar. So there might be a binding and restricting of yourself in a process, and you're just used to it. You don't pay much attention. However, if you're already paying attention and actively seeking transformation through your tattoos, it's highly likely you'll experience some discomfort. And this time it's the result of change. It's like growing pains, right? So moving from one stage to the next. I get this all the time with my clients, which again is in opposition to like what most people are looking for in the industry or presenting to their clients in the industry. I'm comfortable with other people's discomfort now in the tattoo process because I know they're meeting the process in a way that's activating change within them. I'm not trying to jump around and make people happy or try and fix the situation. Anything that is new, even if it's good for you, will feel uncomfortable until it becomes familiar. Conversely, anything familiar will automatically be perceived as good or comfortable, even if it's doing you harm, even if you're just stuck. People often get tattooed in self-destructive cycles without even knowing it. They reinforce their self-perception because it feels good or normal. But feeling good doesn't mean that it is good. This is when we need to discern what's actually happening as a result of the tattoo. What can we learn from this? How about buying shoes that are a size bigger? Shoes that will hold us accountable. What about shoes that we need to fill, that we need to grow into, growing into who we want to be? You still need to be able to stand and walk around in them, right? Without tripping over. You don't want to get a tattoo that's so oversized in its representation that it becomes like this illusory ideal of yourself and gives the impression to people that you're someone that you're not, or indeed gives yourself the impression that you're someone that you're not. That would be the wrong use of tattooing as well. And yes, it definitely happens. We see it. It's like kids dressing up, right? Playing dress ups. Kid comes out wearing dad's big boots and like mom's floppy hat. It's funny. So the impact of a tattoo on you at this really deep level, it's not the only layer worth considering, but it's pretty significant in the bigger scheme of things. It's worth reflecting on. So when we set aside all the distractions and we start actually asking the existential questions about why we're doing something, why it exists, we see that tattoos actually connect real deeply to the reality of who you are beneath all of the stories. It's about your essence. This is the aspect of you that you want to be represented in your tattoos. That will draw the right people to you. It will repel others. And your tattoos have a relationship with this part of you. They are enmeshed. This is having a proper fitting tattoo, a tattoo that fits who you are. So when we can accept this, we start to see how far we've come from the tattoos that we already have. If there's a tattoo there that doesn't fit right, we can see how we've changed. And this is really precious. This is part of what we do at Tattoo Pathway. Healthy reflection, dropping the guard, taking off the armor, allowing ourselves to reveal to ourselves who we thought we were. We can use that information as a springboard. We don't want to be feeling put off by the idea that we got tattoos that were wrong, and denying them and dismissing them. Instead, we want to use them, make it right, work with the canvas. Don't let feelings from the past hold you down or stagnate you. Look at them, pay attention, and use them to elevate yourself. Flip the script. Continue with the tattoo process. Don't stop. Take what you've got and make it work for you. Use your tattoos in a way that they pull you forward on that path of betterment, course correctment, healing, refinement. The idea is to be green and growing, not ripe and ready to rot. So Tattoo Pathway is about guiding people to do that, to elevate themselves out of the subconscious patterns that often show up in their tattoos And then you can reframe your tattooing. It can become a really, really valuable tool for personal growth, self-discovery. And you use your conscious mind and something beyond yourself, which we refer to as a greater power, to allow you to decide. Some people say we can't make decisions. It's all predetermined conditioning. But I'd say there's only one choice that we can actually make, and that's to bring awareness into a moment and decide who you want to be, where you want to go. And so the tattoo process is an acknowledgement. It is a point of making a decision. It's contractual. And then you must allow your being to adjust, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't know yet how it's meant to feel or look. It's important to understand that this type of change doesn't happen in one big moment. It's not like a big transformation in a moment. And this is another big mistake, another misinterpretation of tattooing intentionally or in this sacred way. It's not magic. The tattoo isn't going to change you in a puff of smoke and make you into a new person. It doesn't do that. Instead, it serves as a guiding force. So it aids in a small way so that you can see things, make incremental shifts. And these shifts aren't effortless. They require consistency and a devotional relationship. And I'd say community. That's why we're moving towards that with the work that we're doing. The way I see it, the start of a tattoo process, when it's one that is aimed at transformation consciously and intentionally, that's why people are engaging with it. It often marks a tipping point. Someone senses that there's change happening, or there might be a particular event that's happened, but the real transformation actually takes time. It's not instantaneous. There's an unfolding. There's a gradual integration into their lived experience. And that's when things click. And this is why I often work with people over long periods of time. This adjustment and newness takes time to integrate and creates a different version of them. And no one really tells you that, or they just try and fix that uncomfortable feeling or make it okay or promise you something like an instant result. Again, contemporary tattoo culture, instant gratification. I want a photo that looks good now. I want a tattoo that looks good now. I want a tattoo that feels good right now. It's like, get something that you're going to feel good about, that's going to look great, feel great, represent you in 10 years, 20 years. What does that look like? Think about that. A real transformation or a change in your character, in who you are, isn't going to provide that instant gratification. In fact, after a positive or a generative act, what I've seen with people and what I experience is that you're more likely to feel a little destabilized or confused. So there's a disruption to what's normal. So I hope this discussion points out the lack of guidance in contemporary tattoo culture without diminishing the value of it. There's lots of beautiful people working away in their corner of the world, doing great tattoos, but it isn't sufficiently placed to guide people repeatedly through journeys of transformation in a way that works. It's not to say that people can't achieve those results going through the current setup and practices in the way that it is, but there's a definite lack of guidance and there are trails of destruction. There's lots of like side trails that aren't ones that you need to take, that you've got to navigate. Yeah. And so this is a significant factor that's motivated me from my own tattoo journey, the people that I work with, and it's a major wind in the sails for Tattoo Pathway and the community that we're doing this year. So I'll ask you again, who do you want to be in 2025? You might have an answer in mind already. You might have your sort of goals and your resolutions set up. You might not. But one thing that we're striving for at Tattoo Pathway, and we want to help everyone achieve that's part of the community, is that dignified beauty. It's the coherence of that technical information and that spiritual wisdom. It's the physical and the metaphysical, applied practice, spiritual and emotional maturation, manifesting a story in the skin as a result of trusting in something beyond yourself, engaging something beyond yourself. And throughout the tattoo journey, there's usually a change or a transformation that takes place, a healing. And due to constant exposure, it's not instantaneous, with something beyond yourself, with this process, with this way of engaging, eventually a purification happens, one that's dignified and beautiful. So 2025 is going to be super valuable for anybody who gets involved with Tattoo Pathway. The reality is that our community is still a very small pool of humans at the moment. So there's not many people that know about us or get involved, which means we have a lot of time and energy for those that turn up. It's like high value for money. And even the majority of people that I tattoo, so people who come in, spend lots of time with me, get tattooed, receive the benefits of this way of tattooing, of this way of seeing, often openly state to me, I could never get tattooed any other way. Can't believe that this was possible. Had no idea that tattoos could be looked at like this or engaged with like this. Still, most of those people aren't within the Tattoo Pathway community space. It's so new. People have tattooed are spread out over such a long period of time. But I'm hoping again, convergence, to bring everyone in together, to bring people together. What we've seen with the people that have done the coursework or do get involved with the workshops and webinars that we do is that they're years ahead of the contemporary tattoo culture right now. How they engage with their tattoos, how they feel about them, through what they've been learning, the relationships they're forming, what they're experiencing. It's a huge paradigm shift. And a lot of the time when they talk about their tattoos to someone who hasn't been within that space or has understood the things that they're learning, there's a huge gap. They're not even talking about the same thing anymore. Most people are here on the surface and they're dropping into this undercurrent, this deeper, older way of engaging with their tattoos and using them, like we're talking about, to move, using them to grow. And interestingly, most of the people aren't artists. This is a misconception too when people engage with us from the outside world, is they think it's for artists. They think we're offering things for artists because most of the industry just thinks about the artists, just generates content and material and courses for artists. The tattoo culture, the community that they have is the artists. We're not focused on the artists. We're focused, and I want to make it clear, on a space and a way for everyone who's getting tattooed, the people it impacts the most. We're focused on supporting and educating people on the receiving end of tattoos. So the person who's getting tattooed, who wants to continue getting tattooed, that wants to get tattooed for the first time, we're focused on you. What's motivating you? What's the result of your tattoo going to be? Have you considered these things? Are you supported? How are you quantifying what you're going to get and who you're going to work with? Have you thought this far ahead? Have you thought immediately at this point? So tattoo pathways for you. Artists are welcome, especially if they're humble enough to come in and not think they know everything and allow themselves to go through this process. The course content we have, which we're not running the course anymore. There's just the community. The course is the textbook. That's what we're calling it. It just sits on the shelf. It's a document that anyone can refer to. It's at a level that we feel can be carried forward and applied in the foreseeable future by our community members. Something we can teach from and that community can sort of draw on and learn from. It is a working document. It's going to change. It's early days. But over the past 4 years, myself and Taylor and Jirish have worked on it and combed it and taken people through it, and we think it's in a good space. So that's a big milestone, pulling all of these observations together, layers of applied and tested knowledge, insights into a clean, precise document people can use to guide their tattooing. Like I said, it's an unlearning more than anything. Within the community, we've also set up a cyclical walkthrough. We're using a wheel. It's a process that you can overlay every time you get tattooed, which takes you through the course material with each pass of getting tattooed. And so each time you go through, it goes deeper. It scrubs away at like the plaque, I guess, of conditioning of what we think tattoos are. And it makes your experience cleaner, clearer, more connected to what's actually happening, to the reality of it. So your tattoos can connect you to you, not to some idea of you. And I'm pumped about this because this cyclical way of operating is, again, it's so ancient. These cycles of time, not this linear time, and these patterns that emerge. The first time I ran the course, it was the last principle in the course. It was called Tattoo Time. And the main reframe in it is about building a relationship with your tattoo process an awareness or a sense that allows you to identify when it's time to get tattooed. You understand its role and its purpose, and you know when and how to apply it. It's not just deciding, I want to get a tattoo, or seeing something and like, I want to get that. It's similar to like a seasoned gardener who just knows when it's the right time to sow a seed. They know that seasons are changing. They don't need to look at a calendar. They don't need to read their seed packet. They don't need the big major signs. They can sense subtle things are shifting, and then they can align their process of gardening to reap the most benefit. I watched a sailing doco the other day, and these guys are incredible. They could use that same sense. They were so attuned 15, 20 seconds before the wind changed. They were making changes on the boat to line themselves up and to capitalize on that change in force to propel them forward. Okay, quick review. That's what I was meant to be doing in this podcast, what we did this year. In-person mapping, online webinars, the course, it's been amazing. The research we conducted online provided some really nice, clear patterns. They're going to be published on our website. But the biggest shift that Tattoo Pathway actually initiated for myself and those that have been engaging with it is the understanding of the more to tattooing. We're not just looking at tattoos themselves or examining the larger web that the tattoo is woven into. And as a result of like putting all of our ethos together for the pathway, refining that course material, distilling the teachings, this really beautiful narrative, which is rich with symbols and metaphor, has started to come forward. The story of those engaging with their tattoos, and as a result, the inner mechanisms that contribute to that process of who they are, how they experience the world. It is a journey. There are challenges. It is transformative. And so these symbols come through, like the river of life, the mountain of material existence, the canoe, which is your vessel that assists you in navigating the water. These images come through and they conjure up a very old and deep story. It's in us. It's our nature. It's about progressing, growing, traveling, searching, finding our way back to the primordial ocean. And so if you're someone who is engaging with just tattooing, but you're curious, you're intrigued about what more is and what it could open up for you, or if you're aware of the more, but you just haven't had access to it, you haven't known where to go, you haven't had guidance, or if you don't know what the finish line is for your tattoos, you're deep in it and you're just like a bit confused, lost, or giving up on it, come check out the Tattoo Pathway. You can look at our website, you can look at the community. The community is going to launch in February this year. The 1st and 2nd of Feb, we have an in-person event, and we're also going to do an online launch event. So it's not just an online community. It's not just an in-person gathering. It's more than that. It's an opportunity to meet others and to form actual community, shared stories, shared understanding, mutual processes where you can really meet each other and get into the crux of what's happening in a really intentional and powerful way this year. So if you feel the significance of your tattoo experience, whether it's with me or if you get tattooed somewhere else, but all of this stuff is landing, I encourage you to have a look, join us. If you're drawn to being part of something bigger within the tattoo space, something that's growing, I'm excited about where it could go. There's the online community that welcomes you. And I think together we're going to create a space where tattooing as a transformational practice allows us to build connections and do something for the future of tattooing. Do something for our future that just isn't the same comfortable thing. We're moving into the uncomfortable and hopefully growing something that's going to be dignified in its beauty.